So, good evening, everybody. And I want to just thank you for joining us tonight. This is, I don't know which number it is in our Women Erase series, but we've been having basically monthly meetings and presentations, and it's just been a joy to learn all the things that we've learned from the many speakers that we've had. My name is Deb Rose Milovec. I am the co-director of Future Church, along with my other co-director, Russ Petrus. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to pray. So if you could just bow your heads. We give thanks, O God, that in every generation you have raised up prophets and truth tellers. These voices call us as church and society to conversion and reconciliation. As when Mary of Magdala first proclaimed the resurrection, you have given their words power to move us from despair to hope, from grief to healing, from fear to courage, from death to new life. And so we pause once more this day to listen to the prophets and the truth tellers as their stories instruct us and inspire us. Their calls for justice and inclusion call us to conversion, and their dreams and visions give us hope for a world made new. Amen. So let me begin. The topic of women and the media is of great interest to me. It's a topic of enormous importance for Catholics today, because we know that media has a tremendous influence in shaping our understanding of current events. The same is true for Catholic media, shaping what we understand about the current events in the church. The question we want to explore tonight is how women and women's interests and issues are reported in Catholic media. We hope to apply that same hermeneutic of suspicion that we apply to our study of the Bible and our history and traditions in the church. How do women show up in the daily news? Which stories are covered? Which stories are not reported? Which stories make the front page? Which stories are relegated to soft news? Do the words used in the stories reveal a truth or conceal it? And most important, who decides? We know that in the secular media, although women represent 40% of all athletes, only 4% of media coverage focuses on their games and their feats. We know that women in the political class are judged differently than men. Unless there is sweat and hair color dripping down the side of their face, the media rarely comments on what men look like, their hairstyles, or what they are wearing. Most of the attention is devoted to their exploits, ambitions, and accomplishments. Although it is somewhat improved, women still suffer from underreporting. Their talents, their merits, their skills are all underreported, sometimes dismissed, while there is still too much attention on what they look like and what they're wearing and whether they're even trustworthy to be heard at all. As part of our Women Erase series on October 9th, Dr. Tara Tuttle helped us understand how the Boston Globe ignored and underreported the clergy sex abuse of nuns and shaped the narrative to blame homosexuality rather than clericalism, patriarchy, and misogyny as the root causes of the abuse. So tonight, I am very happy to have one of my favorite, maybe my favorite journalists in the whole world, Heidi Schlumpf, the executive editor of the National Catholic Reporter, here to lead us in this discussion. She has been in the Catholic media business for decades and knows well both the obstacles and the opportunities. Heidi Schlumpf was named the National Catholic Reporter's executive editor in 2020 after serving as the publication's national correspondent for 3 years. As national correspondent, Schlumpf did in-depth coverage on the influence of money in the church, sex abuse, politics, women's issues, racism, and young people in the church. Her work has included investigations into EWTN and Fellowship of Catholic University Students, otherwise known as FOCUS, and popular Catholic author Matthew Kelly. She previously wrote an opinion column for NCR for almost a decade. Heidi Schlumpf has 3 decades of experience covering religion, spirituality, social justice, and women's issues, having previously served as managing editor of U.S. Catholic Magazine and as a reporter at Chicago's Archdiocesan newspaper, as well as secular newspapers in California and Wisconsin. Her work has been published widely, including by places like CNN Opinion, Sojourners, and Huffington Post. She taught journalism as an associate professor of communication at Aurora University in Illinois. As a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, she also earned a master's of theological studies from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary at Northwestern University, where she studied under one of my favorite feminist theologians, Rosemary Radford Ruether. She is the author and editor of 3 books, including Elizabeth A. Johnson, Questing for God, published by Liturgical Press in 2016, the Notre Dame Book of Prayer, published by Ave Maria Press in 2010, and While We Wait, Spiritual and Practical Advice for Those Trying to Adopt, published by ACTA in 2009. Heidi Schlumpf is based in Chicago, where she lives with her husband, Edmund, and their 2 children. She is a member of St. Gertrude Parish. Please welcome Heidi Schlumpf.
Thank you so much, Deb and Russ, for inviting me today. It really was so prayerful to just listen to everyone introducing themselves. I feel like we were building this community, and to hear from all over the world how many people have joined us tonight to talk about this important topic. I loved hearing that a couple folks are from my hometown in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. I feel right at home. So I am grateful not only for being invited, but also to all of you for joining us here tonight. I know many of you are supporters or subscribers, readers of the National Catholic Reporter, and we are always so grateful for your support. I was asked to talk about 2 of my favorite subjects. So as you could tell, probably from my biography, I'm very interested in women in the church, women's issues. Much of my career and life has been devoted to that. And as a member of the media, obviously that's of importance to me, but I think we've all learned in the last 4 years how crucial the media is. We need the media to tell the truth, especially when we're living in a time of much disinformation, and we need the media to hold the powerful accountable. Being a journalist for me is really a calling. I think of it as a vocation. And it's something I'm always happy to talk about and share with other people. In addition to being a really important time for the media, these last years have really been a time of reckoning for our country and for our church. We've had to look at the many prejudices and discriminations that affect people here, whether most importantly, racism above all. We've also had to look at classism, heterosexism, and sexism. So many organizations, including news organizations, have had to look at themselves and look at the work they do and who does it, and say, does this represent the diversity and the breadth of the people who read or view or listen to our media, or the potential people who could be reading and listening and viewing us? So in the Catholic media world, we've had to do this also. Although I think it can be hard to tell that there's been much of a reckoning going on if you look at the mastheads of some publications. So I did a little research, as journalists are wont to do, and I looked at, I think it's 14 Catholic publications to see how well are women represented at these publications on the editorial staffs. So a caveat is that I use their online staff lists, and not everyone provides one. I did not include, for example, their business or marketing staff, and I don't claim that my numbers are 100% accurate, because things may have changed. since these things were posted, but I think it's a helpful look at whether women's voices are being heard in Catholic media. So if possible, while I talk about this, I wanted to share my PowerPoint. Can I do that? Russ, are you the person I should ask? Do I have
You should be good to go. Yep.
permission so I can just open this up? So can you see this?
Down at the bottom of the Zoom
I have to
window,
say share screen.
share screen
Share
and
screen.
choose PowerPoint.
There we go. I should have this Zoom thing down by now, right? We all should. Let's see here, and slideshow. Beginning. So now everyone can see that?
Yep, we're good. Thanks.
Okay, so we can skip through this. All right, so let's take a little walk through the Catholic press, shall we? I start with Catholic News Service, which some of you may be familiar with. Catholic News Service is a news service like the Associated Press or Reuters that provides content to its member publications, and NCR is a subscriber to the Catholic News Service. It's also part of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, which might make some of us immediately suspicious, but I can assure you that the staff at CNS they are real journalists and have quite a bit of, maybe not perfect independence, but a lot of freedom to do really serious journalism. Their director and editor-in-chief is Greg Erlandson, but they do have women in top positions, including Julie Asher, who is their top national editor, and Cindy Wooden, who is their Rome bureau chief. According to their website, 11 of their 23 staff members are women, so that gives them a percentage of about 48% women. Moving ahead to the Catholic News Agency, which is a competing news service that also provides content to subscriber publications, some of whom are diocesan newspapers. They are now owned by EWTN, the television network, and their executive director is Alejandro Bermudez, and they do not list their staff on their website or have it available, but I know that they have writers who are women, but I was only able to look at their top sort of leaders. So Alejandro is executive director, and their previous editor, pictured here, is J.D. Flynn, and their Washington bureau chief is Ed Condon. Both of these gentlemen just recently left Catholic News Agency, but 3 months ago, those three men would have made up the top editorial leadership at CNA. So they get a 0% of women in top editorial leadership. Now, JD and Ed recently left to form their own Catholic media organization. It's called Pillar Catholic. And it's I know they're working with some freelancers, but it's currently a two-man show, literally. So that also gets a 0% of women in their editorial leadership. So those are the two main news services. This takes us to the Eternal Word Television Network, which some of you know I had written a pretty in-depth, 3 or 4 part series about. Although it was founded by a woman, Mother Angelica, it's now a very large, complex global media conglomerate. Their president and CEO is Michael Warsaw, and they have a COO of EWTN News, Andrew Walther. They also don't have a masthead of all of their staff, but you can see from their 2 main news shows, and obviously they have other shows that are not news. The EWTN News Nightly has as its anchor, Tracy Sable, and the lead anchor news director, Raymond Arroyo, who you may also see sometimes on Fox News with Laura Ingraham. He has his show once a week called The World Over. Down in the corner, you can see he has a group of commentators. They call themselves the Papal Posse, and they are all men, white men at that. And so looking at the top leadership of EWTN, with 1 out of 4, we have a 25% of women. Also part of EWTN, the conglomerate, is the National Catholic Register, which is a Catholic newspaper. We sometimes call it the other NCR, and they probably call us the other NCR. And some people do get us mixed up, although we come from different ideological perspectives. They were formerly owned by the Legion of Christ, but now they're owned by EWTN. And as part of EWTN News, they're also overseen by Warsaw and Walther. However, their editor-in-chief, pictured here, is a woman, Jeanette DeMello, and they do have women on staff. I calculated 9 out of 19 for 47% women on staff. So I just wanted to briefly also just go over a couple more conservative media you might be aware of. And while I didn't look at their entire staffs, you can see from this slide that they are all headed at the top editorially by men. So the Catholic Herald, which is a UK publication, Dan Hitchens was just named editor recently, replacing Luke Copen. First Things, the Catholic Journal, that editor is RR or Rusty Reno. Crisis Magazine, the editor is Eric Sammons. I do have to say, this one was exceptional for me to look at. They have 11 contributing editors, all men, and also their publisher and associate publisher are both men. So a lot of testosterone at that publication. And then the Catholic World Report, their editor, Carl E. Olson. So far, all these publications I've gone through, none have hit the 50% mark, which might be, accurately representing women. And only one has a woman in the top editorial spot. So that's the Catholic Register. So let's look at just a couple more. Some of you may be familiar with Our Sunday Visitor, which is a newspaper, but also part of a larger company that does other things, including books and other publications. Their top editor, or editorial director, is a woman, Gretchen Crow. And on the newspaper, at least, they have a small staff, and 4 of the 7 people are women. So that brings them up, our first one, over 50%, Our Sunday Visitor. Now, their executive leadership team, which is over the broader company, doesn't fare so well. 2 of the 9 people are women for 29%. So this is Our Sunday Visitor. So let's turn to some publications that perhaps some of you as supporters of Future Church might be familiar with. So America Magazine, who I have a lot of respect for and consider a competitor, but in a good way, they're always keeping NCR on our toes. They're a monthly magazine and online publication that's connected with the Jesuits. And as such, their editor, I believe throughout its history, has always been a Jesuit priest. And currently Father Matt Malone is their editor. What's interesting is that there are other 4 top editorial positions that don't need to be filled with a priest. They're editor-in-chief and executive editors. Only one of those 4 is a woman, Carrie Weber. And when you look at their entire staff, America has, on the editorial side, at least 25 people. Only 6 of their staff are women. And that's for a pretty low percentage of 24%. Over at Commonweal, their relatively recent new editor, Dominic Preziosi, I think I'm saying that correctly, is a man, but they have 5 of the 12 editorial staff members who are women, for a percentage of 42. Some of you may be familiar with Crux, the website. It's a online publication. Originally, it was founded as part of the Boston Globe, and the founder is John Allen, who formerly of the National Catholic Reporter, and he is still the editor. Also pictured here is Inez San Martin, who is their Rome bureau chief. They have a staff of 11, of whom 5 are women, so they have a percentage of 45% female. They've also been partnering lately with Word on Fire, which is another media organization, though not a news organization, that's headed by Auxiliary Bishop Robert Barron. So when I started this project, I knew I was going to include ourselves, but I wasn't really sure exactly where the National Catholic Reporter would fall. Well, here we are. I am the second female editor in NCR's history. There have been 10 top editors. Obviously, we have mid-level editors as well. Sister Rita Larrabee was the editor in kind of the early 2000s, and she was the one responsible for getting NCR online. When I look at our current staff, we have 16 staff members, and most of the editorial team that I've been building are women. So our managing editor, our opinion editor, the new editor of Earthbeat, our environmental justice publication, are all women. Josh McElwee, pictured there, the lone man in the slide, is, in addition to covering the Vatican, has been doing some editing as the international editor for the last 6 or 9 months. But if you look at our staff, 10 of the 16 staff at NCR are women for a percentage of 63%. Yay, yes. You might know that we also have a sister publication, literally, called Global Sisters Report, which reports on and includes the voices of religious women. And the 2 top editors there are both women, although they have men on their staff as well. And if you combine GSR staff with NCR staff, we have 15 women out of 23. It boosts us even a little more to 65% women. So I'm proud of this, but as you can see, we still have a lot of work to do with other kinds of diversity at NCR. So last but not least, and this one didn't surprise me, is my former publication where I used to work, US Catholic Magazine, which is a monthly publication put out by the Claretians. And so their top editor-in-chief is a Claretian priest, Father Ferdinand Okori. But they have a relatively small staff these days, and the 3 top editors there are women. So 4 out of 6 people on their staff are female, to give them the highest percentage at 67%. Now, what does all this mean? Of course, in terms of just raw numbers, it's a mixed bag. Some publications come close to or even exceed what I've researched to be the industry average when you're talking about women in media organizations. So on average, women make up 40% of staff at media organizations. Now, there is, both in the secular world and in the Catholic world, a problem that women do not rise up or end up in the top positions where many of the important decisions are made. A number of Catholic publications, as we saw, are way below that in terms of representation on their staff. Also, very conspicuous by their relative absence are people of color. Now, of course, chronicling staff members' gender is not the only way to center women in Catholic media. So first of all, there are a lot of other people who are part of the community, whether it's freelancers, columnists, board members, people on the business staff, and of course, readers. All of them make up part of a publication in addition to the editorial staff. And then there's the content itself. How many women are contributing to the content? Are women quoted? How are the stories angled? How are women's issues covered or portrayed? How are they presented? Some issues surrounding women, particularly women's ordination, are extremely hot button issues in our church, and publications that have an official connection to either a religious order or to the US bishops or to other aspects of the institutional church often are not free and independent to cover such issues as honestly as an independent press can. I think Crux has some independence, although now they're receiving money from some organizations, previously at least the Knights of Columbus, as well as Word on Fire. Commonweal is an independent publication, and of course NCR, we like to bill ourselves as the only independent Catholic news organization out there. But it's true that having women on staff helps to change the culture and to highlight women's voices. So in a hierarchical church where so many positions are limited to the ordained and where only men can be ordained, there's this danger of women being underrepresented and marginalized in the staffing and in the content. So I can tell you that one of my sort of COVID projects was cleaning out years of accumulated junk from my basement, including lots of files that used to be in an office when I had an office outside of my home. And over the weekend, I was doing some cleaning out of some files, and what do I find but notes from a talk that I gave 16 years ago on the topic of women in the Catholic press. So I thought, well, this is a sign. And I read those notes and looked at what I spoke about 16 years ago. And in that talk, I also had a mixed bag in that women's voices seemed to be increasing in the Catholic press. But what I saw too often was that the Catholic press was operating out of fear. Instead of being prophetic, especially around the issue of women's ordination, too many publications that tried to speak up or speak out got in trouble. And that included, we famously saw this at America, also US Catholic, when I was working there, ran into a little trouble with the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And in that talk, I was also discussing the time that Sister Joan Chittister was supposed to speak in Ireland, and the Vatican tried to interfere, and her community, the Erie Benedictines, stood up for her. At the time when I gave this talk back in 2005, I offered some hope to Catholic publications. And I said, we need to take our lessons from Mary Magdalene. So I'm so glad that you mentioned her in the prayer, Deb. So the lessons I took back then, and I think they still apply today, that we need to expel our demons. And the demons, I said, were paternalism and sexism and officiousness, a tendency to just cover the church in its leadership, which is pretty much almost exclusively male. The second lesson from Mary Magdalene was to put our money where our mouth is, because Mary Magdalene was an investor in a way in Jesus's ministry. And Catholics need to invest in Catholic media, and especially publications that they think are doing a good job of covering women's issues. And then the third lesson from Mary Magdalene was to not be afraid to go and tell the truth and speak the truth. So as the first witness to the resurrection, she did that. Today, probably more than ever, women have access and power in Catholic journalism, but there is still so much to be done. And this doesn't even scratch the surface of what has become a priority for me as editor of NCR. And that is hiring and giving voice to people of color. All of our newsrooms, NCR's included, are almost exclusively white. That has to change. And I am working on that as quickly as I can to bring those voices, whether they're as staff people or writers or board members, to NCR. So I've been editor now for just under a year. I was named just as we were all going on lockdown in the pandemic. And I started officially in May. And it's been a wild ride. I don't generally recommend switching to a new position of authority just as a pandemic begins. But I'm proud of the work that NCR staff have done in covering this crazy year that included a very important presidential election. And I'm very excited to try to take NCR into the future and continue its history of groundbreaking, honest journalism, but to do it with better representation of all voices, including women and including more people of color. So those are the things that I brought to share with you tonight, but I'm very excited to also hear from you and take questions. And I know we allowed quite a bit of time for that. So I'm happy to do the question and answer now.
Okay, wow. Thanks, Heidi. Oh, that's just the kind of information that I love to see. So, so what we're going to do is if you have a question, you can unmute your mic and that way you'll come to the top of the list, or you can put your hand up. I see we already have somebody with their hand up. So, so either unmute yourself or put your hand up, and I will call you in the order that you come up. And when I call on you, ask your question, keep it to the point, and then mute yourself again so that we can keep that noise down. So I see Diana Diamond had a question. Yes, go
Yes, I
ahead.
did. And thank you very much, Heidi. I really respect all that you do. But I do have to disagree with you in part. I've been a feminist all my life. I've been a journalist for 45 years, full-time paid. I've also been, I know women have to get ahead. My philosophy is it always has to be even. I mean, men and women have to get ahead. I just can't concentrate and say, okay, this is a good publication because 65% of this, and only this publication only has 20% women. That's bad. I think it's a false standard. I think we need equity in life, not just women doing their thing. I know we've been underrepresented, but I think it's a false standard to judge us on. And this, no idea, I don't dare venture there, but I'll try. But to judge people on how much racial balance we have is good. I mean, I think that we need more racial balance than we have now. But these are, to me as a journalist, false standards in terms of who is the most competent person to hire, who is the best reporter we have around, who asks the best questions. So I'd love to hear your response.
Sure. Yeah, I would not, by doing this research, I would not encourage people to say, just read a publication based on how many women are on their masthead. That said, I can tell you we're not really in danger of men not having a say or any power in the church or even in the media. I mean, I have weeks where I go through my email inbox and I realize that I'm either commissioning or responding to pitches, and I have just, read 20 pitches in a row, and they're all from men. So, we are not yet at a point where I think men are in danger of not having a voice in our church. When it comes to hiring, I'm working with our publisher, who is also committed to diversifying NCR. We're very careful to say that while we are having some level of trying to prioritize hiring people of color, we are certainly keeping the standards that we have for hiring competent and excellent people. And those people are out there. And when I do hire them, what I hear is that in other publications, they don't always have the opportunity for moving up in publications or to having their voices heard. So I'm committed to it. I don't think NCR can paint ourselves as the progressive voice of progressive Catholicism with a staff that's like 98% white. I just don't think we can do that in this day.
Okay, I totally agree with you.
Thanks a lot. Let's move to the next person, Elle Connolly.
Hi. So I guess from your perspective, where do you see Catholic media outlets going in terms of shifting away from kind of this white feminism to an intersectional feminism in the way that they approach things? And in that, how do you aspire for the church to shift the narrative within Catholicism to empower women to seek out these opportunities? Because as a younger woman, like I'm 28, most of my peers, like I left the church, I'm coming back to the church, and from like a perspective of wanting the church to be better, but kind of shifting the narrative to empower, to be, I'm struggling to formulate this properly, but
this is a great question.
Yeah.
And thank you for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we need an intersectional feminism. And I think that there are women of all ages in the church and without who see that. But I find a lot of energy among young women about this kind of intersectionality. And so I think that's one way to bring it into our publication and into our churches, to encourage young women, because that's naturally where they're going, and young men for that matter as well. I did a podcast this morning with a young woman, even younger than you. She's 1 year out of college. And she interviewed me about being liberal and being in the church. And I was really encouraged speaking with her, because she had a deep faith, but discovered, through college, that she has more of a liberal bent in her politics, and wanted to know, like, can I stay in the church in this way? And my answer is yes, of course. And find community that can help support you in doing that. I've been very encouraged. NCR staff is pretty young. I'm an old person on the staff there, in my 50s. And the young women on the staff and some of the young men, they inspire me every day, that I'm pretty confident that this is going in the right direction. Now, that's in our progressive circle. I don't think things are going that direction in some parts of the church. I'm not exactly sure how to fix all that, except to keep plugging along in our part of the circle.
Thank you so much, Elle.
Thank you.
Next question is with Marie and Sarah. Marie, can you unmute? Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
Hi. This may be a kind of a simplistic question, but I can see why it could be a yes or a no. In seeking to increase diversity, is there an option for people of other faiths to participate?
Yeah, not everyone at NCR is Catholic.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
I think for our reporting jobs, we do ask that the people have quite a bit of experience covering the Catholic Church. So I don't ask people what they're practicing or what their institutional affiliation is, but generally you need a lot of experience in the top editorial jobs or the reporting jobs to understand the church. But yeah, no, not everybody's Catholic.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. Andrea Di Giovanni.
Oh, thank you so much. Heidi, that was wonderful. My question comes from my own work. I teach biblical studies, and I sometimes find that when it comes to something like, say, women in the Bible, a phenomenon is that it's everybody who's not a woman in the room just kind of clicks off. And so I'm wondering if in journalism, I'm just interested to hear your strategies for overcoming that phenomenon, for making stories about women and women's issues important to everybody, or if there's something that you might reflect on in your experience with that type of issue.
That's a good question. So we don't really have that problem at NCR. Whenever we run a story about women's issues, it does very well on our site. We look at our analytics and they go up, up, up. And we do have a higher than average number of women readers. So it's higher than 50%. I think that the intersectionality with other justice issues is one way to keep people informed. I think, LGBTQ rights is a very important issue for young Catholics and Catholics of all ages. Witness the news of the past week about the ban on same-sex blessings. So, I think there are ways to look at all of the justice issues in the church as connected, and maybe connect them or see them as we're all on the same team, kind of fighting for justice for everyone. But that's a good point. We don't have that problem though. Our readers love to read about women.
Great. Thank you very much, Heidi. Thanks so much for that question. Evangeline, oh my gosh, you're next on the line. It's good to see you all the way from India. All right, good.
Thank you. Media has this very unique possibility, being the voice. And voice need not necessarily be equated with the same kind of social location and the value ascribed to that particular location. For example, that voice can be a male voice, can be a female, can be black, white, rich, poor, whatever, and yet can be trained to speak a language of justice. The, same intersectionality, but intersectionality that is kind of surrounded by justice issues. In spite of this possibility and reality, from your analysis, from your description, in terms of gender, it was so difficult to see even a male colored person in the place of, just say male, female. Racial inequality, racial exclusion, absolute exclusion is so much part of the media reality. And I wonder if it will come at all, only in terms of, say, including of perspectives, whether there is any possibility at all for change in the root, absolute ground level. Is it possible at all?
Well, I think it has to happen, or Catholic media are not going to survive, at least in the United States. So we are moving to a church that's going to be predominantly people of color. We can't have newsrooms that are 90% or 75%, white men. I just don't think that unless we're doing things, writing about things that are relevant to the church of the future, we don't. There are some Catholic news organizations that have a lot of money, and so they can exist even if they don't have a lot of, readers or subscribers. They can still have an outsized influence if they have money. And on that topic, see the series I did on EWTN. But most publications have to be relevant so that people will read them, subscribe, or otherwise support. And in this day and age, I just think if we don't move towards that, I don't see how we can exist in the future.
Thank you so much, Evangeline. So the next one on our list is Regina Bannon. Hey, Regina.
Hi, Deb. I really want to support everything that you've done with NCR. I'm very encouraged by it. I have two questions. One is sort of technical, and that's whether you consider LaCroix International in the universe of publications that you reported on. And the second one is whether you see the Catholic reform movement as suitable topics for coverage in the United States as well as abroad. Certainly NCR has done the best job of coverage, but maybe not all the organizations. And I guess my final question is, do you plan to establish another book review editor, and how you'll deal with Catholics for Choice?
Oh my, let me see. Start from the beginning. First one was about LaCroix. Actually, yeah, and I didn't include a lot of international publications in this little mini study here, except for the Herald. LaCroix, located in France, is, if you're talking about LaCroix International, so the religion section run by Bob Mickens, we
Right.
just entered into a experimental 3-month partnership with them in which we're doing some sharing of content. So for example, we ran a column, I think it was yesterday, from Massimo Fagioli
Right.
for LaCroix, and we reprinted it on our site, and they're using some of our reporting on the LaCroix International site, some of the North American reporting that we're doing. So yeah, I definitely see them as part of the universe. The second question was about, I'm sorry,
Church reform movement?
Oh, church reform, of course, yes. So we've covered church reform all along, and I think it's obviously something we would continue to cover. We did a series of stories about call to action. If this is what I think you mean by church reform, these kinds of organizations. They're, I think, doing some great work, reinfusing with some energy, being relevant to young people, primarily by being brave and prophetic around the issue of race and other church reform issues as well. I can tell you as an editor, it's always a struggle. It's never that there's not enough news to cover. There is so many things that we could do and could cover, and given our small staff, I'm not able to do it all. So there's always things I wish I could cover more, but I try to, I mean, this is my job to try to balance and make sure we get a good mixture, at least over time. We do have another book review editor. So Olga Segura, who is our opinion editor, took over books and pop culture, which we have moved to Saturdays as the day that we run those stories. And she's doing some really creative and exciting things that are bringing a lot of traffic from a different demographic to our site, especially young people.
Right.
Shows that I don't watch as a hip old person. We're excited about that, but she's also doing books at the same time. She's currently part-time, so she's not a full-time staffer. She just had her own book come out. But I think we're going to continue to be committed to books. She's about to launch a new live, Facebook live podcast type of project in the next month that will be about pop culture and books.
Very good. Thanks, Regina. So, and by the way, Olga Segura will be with us for our Women Witnesses for Racial Justice series on April 6th. So join us to hear Olga. Anita Baird. Anita, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Heidi. Nice to see you. Yes, a couple of questions. One, can you speak a little bit more about how NCR will keep systemic racism at the forefront going forward? And have you considered a way to include more voices of women and men of color who are religious to have their voices at the table on a consistent basis? Because I think you're absolutely right. One of the biggest problems is that we do need to increase at the table the voices of color that are helping to make the decisions and to bring about change and to represent the universality of the church. So thank you.
Amen. So nice to see you. We go way back.
I know, good to see you, dear.
So yeah, I mean, this is just a priority for me. I tell it to my staff all the time. And I talk about it with my higher ups, the board members and my publisher. It's a challenge, but I think we can do it. I mean, I have not specifically prioritized people of color who are religious. I think you mean like priests and nuns and sisters. Obviously, Global Sisters Report does a great job of having diverse voices, in part because global is part of their mission, whereas we are national, although we try to have an international scope as well. It's just something, it's going to take a little time for me to build. I came to NCR after 2 years of us having an interim editor, Tom Roberts, who had come back temporarily. And we're really grateful that he came back and kind of helped pull us back together. But in a sense, there was a lot of work to do when I took the job, and I've yet to be able to meet in person with my staff. So I've been stuck in this room, basically in Chicago. But I see amplifying the voices of Catholics of color and specifically issues around racism is something that it's just the right thing to do, but it's also important that we do it because not all Catholic publications are doing it.
Thanks, Anita. Next one on the list is Kathy and Ed Hart. I don't know which one of that team, but.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I have two questions. First of all, it's been very interesting listening in and all the questions in your presentation. Could you speak kind of to the business end, the money end of operations and how that affects your own publication and online presence, and maybe give an overview how it affects other Catholic publications. And secondly, a question, do you have any idea, I have a feeling that most Catholics, or many Catholics, get their Catholic news from their diocesan paper, if at all, or their Sunday bulletin, and that's kind of it, perhaps. Can you speak a little bit to what percentage of publications that identify as Catholic are not directly controlled by a diocesan bishop? Thank you.
Well, obviously diocesan newspapers are, although there's a lot of good journalism, I know at least through the years that happened at diocesan newspapers. I was a diocesan newspaper reporter before I went to US Catholic. You know, most Catholic publications do have some connection to the institutional church, and that does sort of relate to your first question, which is about the finances. So for example, when I worked at US Catholic, I was always grateful to the Claretians for their financial support of US Catholic, and seeing that as a ministry that was run by lay people, but that the Claretians saw as part of their publishing ministry. That's not the same as being under a diocesan bishop, but I can tell you that when the CDF got mad about the article I wrote about women's ordination, they you know, had to hire, the Claretians had to hire a canon lawyer, and their not the provincial, the top guy had to come from Rome and figure out how we were going to deal with that. When you're an independent publication, those issues are not, they're not affecting the journalistic decisions that you make. On the financial side, increasingly journalism, even secular journalism, is realizing that the old model doesn't work, that subscriptions and advertising are not enough to keep a publication afloat. There are a lot of costs involved in the staffing of people who are needed to do. We're now a daily online publication in addition to the print edition that we do every 2 weeks. And it requires a lot of people to produce all that content and get it online every day. I'm grateful that Tom Fox, former editor and publisher and now current board member of NCR, was very visionary early on to see that that model wasn't going to be enough to support NCR, although subscriptions and advertising still brings in a lot of revenue for us, and it's very important to us. He early on decided that we needed to move to a model of fundraising, which includes asking people for donations if they support the mission of our journalism, and also to approaching foundations and getting grants for the work that we do. So for example, Global Sisters Report, that project is substantially supported by a grant from the Hilton Foundation, which is very dedicated to the work of religious women. So some conservative media organizations have very wealthy Catholics who share an ideological slant with those publications and put a lot of money into them. There are liberal Catholics who are extremely generous with us as well. It might not be exactly matching, but it's put NCR in some decent financial shape. So we are definitely going to be around for a while. And we're very grateful for the support that we get from our donors.
That's fabulous.
Glad to hear that. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that question. Carol Dempsey, you're next on the list. Howdy, friend.
Hi, Deb. Nice to be with everyone. Okay, I have a couple of comments. First of all, hi, Heidi. It's nice to be with you today. And as I reflect on the representation of women in media, I am struck by that. I think it's really important, but I also think that the issues are much deeper too, because we have to continue to decolonize the whole Catholic culture that we're talking about here, and also the institution as a whole. You know, so I mean, one thing is I am a Dominican, you know, and I've tuned into EWTN, and it's frustrating for me, really frustrating to see two Dominican congregations that, you know, have women time and time again presented there. And to see women, you know, presented by, I think it's John Benkovich, you know, John who does that show, you know. And there's a lot of people, a lot of women that tune into this, a lot of women who are Catholic that are being influenced by all of this. And so, you know, I'm on here as a Bible scholar teaching at the University of Portland. My colleague, whom Deb, you know, has also run into it at times. Suzanne Schultz is here. She's also a Bible scholar. And Andrea, nice to see that you're on here too. And even to begin with talking about biblical studies and how women are portrayed, we have to even begin to think that women in the Bible are the products of the male imagination and the male constructions. We don't even think about that, you know? And for women in Catholicism, we have so much education that has to happen. So my question is, you know, Suzanne has written for NCR and did a marvelous article on Bible translations and tipping the buckets on that. I write for Scripture for Life and have written for Celebration. So how can we, as Bible scholars and as theologians, work with you with this one publication and even more broadly to begin to deal with the theological and the biblical issues at stake here? I mean, even in our field, we're just about crazy with how many people in Catholicism are historically, critically focused.
Well, I mean, and I didn't finish off my PowerPoint that had my email address at the end. Yeah. So I'll share that with everyone. I mean, I'm on the website at NCR as well I mean, it's not easy to spell, but H Schlumpf, HSCHLUMPF at NCR online. And I will entertain pitches from any person who has story ideas. I mean, I think all of these things need to be said. I can't control what's on EWTN, and they have now not only a national, but a global reach, and they're portraying a certain kind of Catholicism across the world. And I think they have an outsized influence, which is why we thought it was very important to do that piece that at least brought that to the attention of other people. So hopefully when people Google EWTN, they find that. Yeah, it's an uphill struggle. And I think media is one part of it. Activism is another part of it. Scholars are another part of it. And we're all working together to try to get our church to move where it needs to be.
Thank you, Heidi. And I loved that piece you did on EWTN. and we'll be in touch with you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Carol. So we have Anne has a question.
Hi,
Yeah.
Heidi. Very interesting to listen to you. I'm a Canadian from Canada, and I have just one question, but one comment. We had here in Canada, our Supreme Court, and this is an analogy with, you know, proper representation of women and people of color. In our Supreme Court of Canada right now, the 9 judges, there's 4 women, 5 men. A former Supreme Court judge, Marie Corbett is her name. She's retired, an amazing woman, wrote a book, but she retired early because of all the injustices in the justice system. And she was interviewed by CBC one time, and the CBC news person asked her a question and said, you know, do you hope that eventually there'll be equality in terms of representation on the bench? And she said, there will only ever be equality for women when the Supreme Court is comprised of all women. For as many years as it's been comprised of all men. So that comment has stayed with me. You know, you think you're talking about this paper or that paper, 67% are women or whatever. Why don't you shoot for 100%? Is my comment. And then the other question, when I speak up in, or if you know a Canadian publications that are not as conservative,
Actually, I'm not as familiar with that. I'd have to think about that. Yeah, I may have to, I don't off the top of my head. I certainly work with many wonderful male colleagues. Many of them are strong feminists, and sometimes even reminding me to make sure that I'm, centering a woman's voice in a piece or something like that, or to raise women's issues. So I'm not seeking to turn NCR into an all-woman, women staffed publication. That said, I think I know it meant a lot to many of our readers to have a woman in the top editorial job. And I think our board did prioritize that. So yeah, I think that men can be good feminists too. So we'll try to work with those ones.
Okay, thank you. I just thought it was an interesting comment that she made. How are we ever going to have global and long-lasting change as long as it's the men in the church that continue to make the decisions? So yeah.
I still go to like a bishop's meeting, and everyone, in the bishop's conference is a man. So
right.
Balance there.
Right. So thank you so much. We're going to take just one more question because it's getting time. So we have somebody named Reverend Dr. Grandma. I'm not sure, but you have your hand raised, so go ahead.
Hi. It's Yoshitomi.
Okay.
And I have been in contact with Heidi. I'm from California. And I first of all want to say that in the months that you have been at NCR, it has been an incredible change for me in terms of reading it and your priorities. You are doing a magnificent job. And I wanted to say, I used to be on the board of NCR in the 1980s. And we were always talking about money, and I think you do need money in this very competitive world. And so if any of you, want to give, I think this is a good time to give. I have a question. I was born and raised Catholic. I am now a priest ordained in the Antioch tradition. I was called forward by an independent Catholic community to do that, to help them run their organization after spending over 25 years as a campus minister working for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. I think what I'd like to see is more stories about the long-lasting independent Catholic movement that I think will be bringing us along to the new church. My community is 45, almost 45 years old. It came out of a terrible child abuse scandal with the Franciscans. They healed from that through the Franciscan community. And there's just a lot of wisdom there. And we're very, smart people and very Catholic in our ways. But we will not put up with what's going on with the structures right now. We love Pope Francis. And I wanted to also say that keep your work up with the wealthy Catholics. I think your work on the Napa Institute in California is extremely important. They have a big influence. And I want to say good evening to everybody, because I think this group is very supportive of my work, and I get a lot of feedback from all of you, but also NCR and Future Church. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Cindy. We appreciate that very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for the plug for for NCR and for the praise of NCR over the last year. Of course, I have not done this alone, and we have a very strong and hardworking staff. who've been, like everybody else, doing it under the stress of the pandemic. I think it's important that we cover these independent movements because other Catholic publications will not. So, you know, I realize that that's also part of our mission. So I appreciate you, and I recognized your name right away because you do email me a lot. So I've seen you before. I didn't realize you were on the board, so thank you.
Heidi, thank you so much for you know, the presentation, for all your wisdom. I do want to ask just one final question. How does it decided what hits the front page? You know, like Global Sisters Report is a great publication, but it feels like it's back page. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's a wrong perception of mine, and I'm glad to be corrected. But, you know, it seems like we still read a lot. Even Olga is a culture editor, which I love, but I'm just like, who decides and how I know you inherited a lot, but who decides who covers more of the news that'll hit the front page? I don't know if you want to call it hard news. I don't know how to describe it, but it's, and then how are those decisions made in terms of what's important for us to read today, right now?
Yes. So that would be me who makes those decisions.
Yeah.
Do it in consultation with the team that I'm trying to build. So I thought it was very important to have sort of an editorial kitchen cabinet. So that's why I asked Josh to come on in an editorial capacity as well, so he could be part of that. Olga was my next hire to that. Managing editor, Stephanie Yeagle, who's been with us for a while. We're in the process right now of hiring a new news editor. And so we'll have some news about that shortly, I think.
Okay.
When you talk about the front page, there's the front page of the print edition, and then there's also the front page of the website. So
yeah.
The print edition, by the time it goes to press and goes through our poor beleaguered postal system, people are getting it. It's pretty old news by then. So we kind of think about that when we make decisions about print. The print is kind of the best of the web, what's run in the last 10 days. And as for what goes on the front page of our website, you know, it's journalism 101. What is in the news? What is likely to be of interest to people? What are everybody talking about? What are things that people should know? We are somewhat limited by the design of our website, which does not do a good job of showing people where things are. Very few people get their news by going to the homepage of a website anymore. They mostly get their news through social media. So trying to improve that. We're a little bit behind on some of our social media and multimedia. We're trying to play catch up to people who are doing a great job with it, like America. We are planning to redesign the web page, and that is something that I'm trying to put off as long as I can because it's a huge project that's very time consuming.
Yeah.
That we could do a better job of showcasing the work that we do so people can find it and see it longer. So open to suggestions and feedback from anybody who's a longtime or new reader of the publication, because it really helps me to make the decisions that I make. And I see myself as a caretaker of a publication that has meant so much to so many people in this church for so long. So I think every day how important of a job it is and how I don't want to mess it up. So any help that people can give me, I would appreciate.
Well, you're doing a beautiful job, and I'm so grateful that you're there. And I don't know if you could hear the great cheer that went up from my part of the world when you were made executive editor. I went, oh my gosh, this is fabulous. So thank you again. I'm going to turn this over to Russ, who's going to lead us in our final prayer and say goodnight to everyone.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you so much, Heidi. That was just a great presentation, and for making so much space for questions. I'm sure you're used to being on the other side, asking the questions, so a little bit of a change of the pace to be taking them. So thank you for that, and thank you to everyone for your wonderful questions and input. So just a couple of announcements for all of you. I did put them in the chat. I'll put them in again. But just to let you know what's coming up in our Women Witnesses for Racial Justice series, we do have a Good Friday Stations of the Cross on Good Friday, April 2nd. That'll be at 12 noon. We're going to follow the women, Black Catholic women, who have had to bear the cross of racism, and yet still continue to push our church towards resurrection. So please do join us for that if you can. And then, as Deb mentioned, on April 6th, we'll have Olga Segura, who's going to present on her book, Black Lives Matter and the Catholic Church. And then coming up next in this series, and you'll all get these emails because you're already on the list, coming up next, we have Sister Sandra Schneiders, who is going to present on Catholic women, feminism, and a new paradigm for church. And that's going to be on April 20th. And then on May 18th, we welcome Natalia Imperatori-Lee, who's going to talk about the role of Latina women. So some great presentations coming up. Please join us if you can. And as we close out tonight, I thought we could welcome into our presence some saints. So Saint Mary Magdalene, apostle to the apostles, be with us. Saint Lucy, patron of vision, be with us. Saint Teresa of Avila, patron of writers, be with us. Dorothy Day, Catholic worker and journalist, be with us. Cokie Roberts, groundbreaking reporter, be with us. Strengthen and direct, we pray, O God, the will of all whose work it is to write what many will read, and to speak where many will listen. May we be bold to confront evil and injustice, understanding and compassionate of human weakness, rejecting half-truth which deceives, and slanted word which corrupts. May the power which is ours, for good or ill, always be used with honesty and courage, with respect and integrity, so that when all here has been written, said, and done, we may unashamed meet you face to face. Amen.